everybody, and welcome to Garden Style. So today we're going to be talking about seed potatoes and how you're going to go about planting them in a small space. Now some of the rules will apply as to trenching them out in your garden, or you can plant them in a pot. Now a couple things to know right off the bat. I'm working with a smaller potato, and these are actually called seed potatoes. They are grown especially for planting. You can use potatoes that come out of the grocery store. However, they do spray them a lot of times with an inoculant to keep the sprouts from coming through while they're sitting in the grocery store. So I always recommend going to your local nurseries and picking them up there, because these are specially made for planting. Now the first thing you need to know is there are eyes in the potato, and I don't know if you can see them there, but you'll definitely get a closer view. But you want to make sure you've got lots of those on the outsides of your potatoes. Now if you have one that's a little bit larger, you want to make sure to have at least 2 to 3 eyes before you cut the potato. And sometimes you can get 2 or 3 seed potatoes out of one potato. It just depends on the size. Now if you're going to cut a potato, a big one, like way bigger than this, if they're about this long, you want to let them dry for a couple of days and let them harden over a little bit before you put them in the soil. If you don't wait, and they go in just fresh right after you've cut them, you take a real high chance of them actually rotting in the soil. So they need a chance to cure, so to speak, for a couple of days before you put them in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in for you and show you how I am going to go about getting a nice crop of potatoes out of a pot, planting them in a pot. You can put them in a bucket if you want to, a horse trough, which is what I use at home, and that way I get a nice crop of potatoes. But you don't need a whole lot of space. If you live in an apartment, you can always use your back balcony and pot up some potatoes in containers out on your back deck. So I'm going to give you a few hints as we go here and definitely get a close-up view as to how I go about putting them in a pot. So here we go. Okay, so I just have an ordinary plastic container that I'm going to be planting these potatoes in. And what I do is I put 5, maybe 6 inches of soil in the bottom, and you want to make darn sure that your container has plenty of drainage in the bottom. So make sure you've got holes in the bottom, and you can use a filter fabric in the bottom or coffee filters to keep critters from coming up to the inside of the pot, or, to keep some of the excess soil from going out of the pot. So I always put something in the bottom, some drainage holes, and then I put about 5 to 6 inches of soil. And then here comes the easy part. You're going to place your potatoes in there, and I just put them in whole, just like that. This is very similar to how you would plant spring bulbs. And I just layer them in there. They can be fairly close. It's not going to hurt anything. And I can get approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 potatoes down here in the bottom. Keeping in mind that a lot of these have eyes in them, like this. So that's where your sprouts are going to come from. So it doesn't matter how you put them in there. You just throw them in, and then we throw a little soil on top. And I don't put the soil on there real deep, and I'll explain to you why here in just a minute. It's about the easiest thing you can do to get a nice crop of potatoes. You don't want any of the potatoes showing. You want them to be good and covered. So that probably means about 3, maybe 4 inches of soil on top. Just like that, and you stop there. Okay, easy peasy. Now, in about 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to start to see some green sprouts coming through the top of the soil. And as soon as you see those sprouts, that's kind of your signal that you're almost ready to cover them again. Wait until your sprouts are about 3 to 4 inches high, and then you put another layer of soil on top of those. And the reason for that is those vines, potato vines, start working their way up through the soil, and you keep going until you get to, about here on your pot, And then you're good to go. And just keep them watered as you continue to keep layering your potatoes. And probably by June, July, you will start to see some of the foliage die back. And that is a sign that your potatoes are ready for harvest. Now the cool thing with potatoes is they are a cool season crop, which means you can plant them right now here in February and have them outside. It's not going to hurt them a bit. And as they're working their way through the soil, you just keep reburying them, and you will have a much heavier harvest by June or July when those foliage leaves start to die back, if you continually to keep layering the vines as they go up, because all they're doing is putting more energy into their potatoes down below to create more for you. And then as soon as the foliage dies back and I know I've got some potatoes, all I do is just turn the pot upside down and reap the harvest. Easy peasy. That's about the easiest vegetable that you can grow. So if you kind of follow those same rules, you should have yourself a nice harvest. And you can do as many pots or containers or buckets, depending on what it is you have handy, to grow potatoes in. It's just super easy. Now when it comes to digging a trench out in the garden, you want to have about a trench that's about 1 foot deep. You plant your potatoes in it just like I did here in the pot, and of course put a thin layer of 4, maybe 5 inches of soil on top. Wait for the sprouts to come through, and you just keep moving the soil on top of them until you're done, until you have about 1 foot of soil sitting on top, just like I do here in this container. Okay, so there's a quick, easy lesson on how to plant potatoes. The cool thing is they're one of the first things to go in the ground, and a definite sign that spring is coming close. So when you go to plant your potatoes, some people like to treat them with Captan or some sort of a fungicide on the outsides. And honestly, if you have a really nice, loose, composted soil that's clean, you shouldn't have any worries when it comes to fungus, unless of course you're getting a ton of rain and they're sitting wet. But the idea is to keep the soil really, really loose, and that way those little vines can start working their way through. You just keep burying them as you go. Once you see they're about 4 to 5 inches high, just keep burying them until you get to the top of the pot. And then you just sit back and wait, keep them watered. That's all you need to do. Now I have used a really neat organic potting soil. It's real rich with cow manure, chicken manure, and these things have been composted and let to rest or sit for at least a year before they, bag them up and it comes in the bag. But I recommend the same thing when you're planting them in the garden, is you don't want to put fresh cow manure or chicken manure down. That's something you usually want to do in the fall. So it has a chance to compost down and leach into the soil and basically not be as strong as it would be if you were to put it down fresh. Then you can plant in it directly. But yeah, I just used a nice organic potting soil to plant them here in the containers, and you can certainly use something very similar if you're talking a really big garden. You can do it by the bale, whatever, rototill it in. But the ticket to growing potatoes is loose soil and then constantly covering the sprouts as they come up. Every 4 to 5 inches, when you see them above the soil, cover them up again, and then they'll just keep working their way through. And that's the ticket to a really nice harvest of potatoes by the end of the season, which is usually June and July. So they're some of the first things that you're pulling out of the garden, besides your cool season crops like cabbage and lettuce and broccoli and that sort of thing. The potatoes are usually the first thing to go in. All right, you guys, of course, if you have any questions or comments, there's lots of room in the description box down below, or you can get a hold of me at gardenstylenw.com or my email at gardenstylenwest.com. Now in my next video, hallelujah, today we're receiving our big huge shipment. We're getting lots of fruit trees, shrubs, that sort of thing, and now is the time to start pruning your fruit trees and other shrubs that are not currently going to be flowering here in the early spring. So I'm going to be covering pruning in my next video, as well as how to plant fruit trees at this time of the year, because the earlier you get them in the ground, the sooner they can get established and actually start to provide fruit for you, depending on the age, by the end of the season, or at least by next year. So fruit trees it is. They're coming in today. All right, you guys, hopefully you're having a very good week. We are getting excited. We've got some nice weather coming our direction this weekend. So I think spring is coming early this year. All right, you guys have a good week, and we'll definitely talk soon. Bye for now.